Time again for Lazarus Planet. This is Lazarus Planet Assault on Krypton. Now, the last one played on with Batman vs. Robin, Poison Ivy, World's Finest, and Monkey Prince. This one plays more into Superman comics, including Jon Kent series and Action Comics. This issue also has a few stories. One seems to take place during Alpha because it's pre-Batman Demon, but post-Heroes Come Together. Another is post-Alpha, and then another one is seemingly the start of Lazarus Storms. While another doesn't really seem to have a for sure time placement during all this, that being the Mercy Grave story. We just know it's during the Lazarus Storm. Now, this cover, like the last one, had Power Girl on it, as is Jon Kent, and also has Mercy Graves. Jon Kent here is also in the Superman blue costume for the 90s. We can also see Dreamer in the background, along with Lilith Clay. This issue starts off with Nia Now, aka Dreamer, in her apartment on the phone with her boss, Cat Grant, when she gets a vision of the Dr. Fate helmet. We cut to Supergirl and Damian Wayne watching over Batman as he recovers from this whole Demon Lazarus stunt from Batman vs. Robin. Dreamer then pops up saying the future has gone dark, which doesn't sound great. This is also the first time Dreamer and Kara have met, which is a pretty big deal since Nia was created for the Supergirl TV show. They talk about the Helmet of Fate, and how Dreamer saw it, thinking while it might be the cause of all this, it may also be the way to stop it. But first, they need to find it, and that's when Batman wakes up, saying Khaled Nassor, who was the most recent Dr. Fate, and maybe that he has a way to track down the helmet. But first, Dreamer needs to use her powers to find him. She tries using her powers as Batman gives her a pep talk because Nia is a little new to this whole thing. She ends up in Khaled's dreams as a doctor while he works at the hospital, and they have some quick banter as Nia remarks Kelly does so Khaled doze off watching medical dramas, meaning he's an actual doctor, which us as the readers already know. But Nia isn't really subtle right now because the fate of the world is at risk, so she cuts to the chase about the Helmet of Fate and really everything. But he doesn't believe her. That's when she hears Nabu, telling her it's no use, that this is more than a dream, but instead Naziah trapped them in here. Nabu guides her to a door that opens to a basement. She ends up in some weird golden room, with Nabu explaining that this is where fate flows, and that she herself is actually more connected to fate itself, and that she's more than she thinks. But as she thinks that she's finally found the Helmet of Fate, she's attacked by something. We don't see exactly what it is, but we know it isn't good. And that's the end of the first story. Then we get our next story in Metropolis. Jon is catching a young man who stole a jacket when Lazarus starts, and as Jon goes down from the Lazarus rain, we see this young man has superpowers now, as Jon blasts off some electricity. Afterwards, this young man brings Jon back to his apartment to rest, and this guy explains how Lazarus rain is giving some people powers, and it turns out he's one of them and has lava powers now. While Jon himself also have seemed to have some sort of switch out, with having electricity powers now. The two work together to take out some thugs and the likes, as Jon doesn't exactly want a superpowered thug going around, as this kid or young man isn't exactly the worst type of criminal, as he's not murdering anybody, he's just stealing. They have some banter on a bridge as Jon starts to look blue. This guy helps out, and before they talk about how his powers are now gone, so he's no longer a superpowered thief. Well, they banter about maybe that when this guy gets free, Jon can take him flying. With Jon saying that he'll put in a good word for him at the police station because, after all, this guy did help out a lot. Only later that we see that's not actually the case where he said that he lost his powers. Instead, he lied. He instead actually used them to escape when he was arrested, and we also learn this guy's name is Ash. And he left a note for Jon asking if he ever had a bad day. This whole plotline is said to be continued in Adventures of Superman, Jon Kent, a new series coming, where it seems like Ash is going to be a love interest in a same vein as Catwoman is for Batman. And I will say, in this story, while it's a little short when it comes down to their banter, I will admit I do see some promise here. And I think it is an interesting idea to do this dynamic with characters of a same-sex relationship, because I don't think it's ever really been done like that before. The next story starts off with Lex and Mercy in Lex Tower as the storm outside gets worse. It's not clear what time this takes place, if it's pre-alpha or post-alpha. All we know it's during Lazarus. The power goes out, but the generators kick in. While Mercy talks about the reports of the storm, which are just cliff notes of what everything we learned in Alpha, in a far better way than Talia al Ghul just randomly getting offended by Supergirl. The storm starts to actually shake up the building. Mercy tries to protect her boss, but a lightning bolt shoots in, hitting Mercy, who jumps in front of her boss, who's actually concerned, but like Ash, she's also got powers now too. Meanwhile, a few levels below, we see the staff are being attacked by some kind of hellhound that escaped the lab, that the Lazarus storm has somehow powered up. Mercy leaves Lex to go fight these hounds, and while she kills one, another one sneaks up behind her and kills her, but as she dies, she is brought back to life as electricity shoots out of her. Her arms goes full Terminator, and we see her powers are like minor shape-shifting abilities. And that is, she can turn her limbs into weapons, which is actually a pretty cool power when you're a bodyguard. And she takes out all the beasts, enjoying her new powers. This, to me, is their way of trying to give Mercy her powers back, because she used to actually have abilities, but because of a lot of reboots, she actually lost them. Because she was once actually an Amazon in continuity, however, that isn't exactly the same anymore. Therefore, I think this is their way of trying to give her powers again, but slightly different, because she never had, like, Terminator abilities, she had Amazon abilities. Then we get a story post-Alpha. Power Girl's drifting and, well, nothing. She suspects that she's dead, only remember fighting with Mary Marvel and Zatanna at the Tower of Fate. She doesn't know what is happening. She sees dead heroes, bright colors everywhere, and even some weird blue version of herself. But she is able to punch her way through this and finds Lily Clay. And the story ends with her being explained by Lily Clay that something is up with her powers, and that Power Girl is actually somewhat telepathic. Personally, I thought this issue was actually pretty good. I really like seeing the different viewpoints of what is happening, because when it came down to Dark Crisis, we really only saw a couple heroes' point of view and a couple villains' point of view. But here we actually get to see multiple heroes, multiple villains, all seeing what is happening, and how they react to it is actually very much in character with them, and it's very interesting to see different characters react to the same event differently. It's just like thinking, like, what would this character act like when the world was ending? And I think it's really done well here. Now, of all the characters, I think my favorite this time around was definitely Dreamer. Now, Dreamer is a character that wasn't introduced in comics right away. Instead, she was introduced in Season 4 of Supergirl. But the character did transition into comics, and when she did, it wasn't exactly done well. The character came across extremely cold and kind of rude towards Jon. However, this time around, the character seems to be far more in line with the character from the TV show's personality, and in my opinion, I think the character right now in this very comic is the best character there's ever been in any sort of comic. And personally, I love the moment where Nabu tells her that she's more than she thinks she is, which, in my opinion, is something that I really, really want to see, because that just sounds really interesting to do a more minor character. Because a lot of times, the whole event is typically centered around a older, not necessarily older, but like a character who's been around for a while. But to have it done with a new character like Dreamer is something that I think is very risky, but can be handled well. And I think, so far, there's a promise there, and I really want to see it happen. We also have Mercy Graves this issue, a character who, also like Dreamer, doesn't originate from the comics, but also came from the media. With her, she came from Superman the Animated Series. Mercy in this issue I thought was great. I love seeing her fighting. I thought the character getting those abilities was actually a pretty interesting idea. Because like I said, the character used to have powers, but they were different. I think this is it's like a very kind of interesting, but like rebootish type idea, because you're bringing back that old plot point of her having abilities, but you're twisting it in a way that is different and unique. And that is by giving her powers that she wasn't born with, and also giving her abilities that are different. And her powers, I thought, were very, very cool. A little hard to describe, which I had difficulty doing in this very video. But regardless, they were really cool. And I hope she gets to keep them. I hope it's not a thing where she gets them for like a couple issues and then she loses them. I want her to have these for like the rest of her character's history. Or at least a couple of years, at least. Because I think they're really cool. For Jon Kent and Ash, I thought their whole flirtation was, in my opinion, better than Jon and Jay's, because Jay is, in my opinion, pretty toxic towards Jon. And while yes, Ash is somewhat like a villain, he's not a straight up murderer villain. Instead, he's more or less a Catwoman type character for Jon, which could also be a very interesting conversation between Jon and Batman, which I think could be really funny. To have Jon maybe go to his Uncle Bruce to ask for advice about what is going on with him and Ash, because Batman, I think, is the only one that would really understand what Jon is going through with Ash. since Superman hasn't really ever fallen for a villain, or at least not in the same type as Batman has. So I think it could be like a bit of like a bonding moment between Jon and Batman to have. I don't know how I feel about Jon having electric powers though. I personally am someone who was not the biggest fan of the whole Superman Blue, Superman Red situation going on in the 90s. I thought for like a one-off Elseworld story, it could be a good idea. But for an entire arc for the main universe, And we know that these powers are going to be sticking around because in the upcoming series, we see photos and promo art of Jon with these abilities. And for Ash's abilities, I think they're okay. They're nothing like special, I guess. I guess they're kind of cool. However, I think there could have been something more interesting to give him, but I guess Lava Powers is okay. Although I'm not entirely sure what's going to go on with Jay, considering the fact that him and Jon and canon are still technically dating. So are they going to break up? I hope they do, because, like I said, Jay does not treat Jon very well. And while, yes, Ash is a criminal, he's at least not trying to, gaslight Jon. And finally, Power Girl. I personally don't know how I feel about her being telepathic. It's just that there's so many characters with telepathic abilities, which we even saw in this very comic, like Nia, Lily, Khaled. I don't know how I feel about Power Girl being a part of their group of telepathic heroes, because it's just something that I don't think works with the character. As unlike Jon's situation, where I think there's some build up to the fact that it was an arc from the 90s, Power Girl being telepathic is a little random to me. Well, Mercy and Jon both have some actual reasoning behind why they have different powers or have powers now. Yes, I know Power Girl was Atlantic at one point, but she wasn't telepathic with those abilities. Instead, she just was really just her with a quote-unquote Atlantic background. It's just a little bit of an odd choice to me. I'm not trying to judge it because we don't really see much of it, and I might like what comes from it. But for now, I have to say I'm not excited for it. Because Power Girl's gone through so many retcons, I don't know if she can withstand another one. And that's it. Like always, please like, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye!